So we get to go back to nonfiction,
Yeah.
possibly. Approximately 2008-ish. We started a design collective in Columbus, Ohio, and there were 4 of us. And we were, our intent was to make housewares-ish, but maybe loaded up with some extra content, maybe a little subversive, in dealing with like invasive species, and there were a lot of kind of creepy things, but we were making, lamps and dishes and some furniture and wallpaper and stuff like that. Later,
and it was 2 groups of 2 couples.
Yeah, 2 groups.
So the 2 of us, and then Stephen Thurston and Rebecca Harvey. And so the 4 of us were all sharing a studio. And it just sort of became, how do we all share what we know? How do we all put our resources in to a greater good to make something that singly we couldn't do?
Yeah, and I think it all kind of emerged at the same time. Like right at the same time we decided to kind of work together, maybe we were already starting to think about working together.
Yeah.
And I'm a formalist and somewhat of a minimalist, really kind of fixated on line and form and all those qualities. And I get really fixated on that stuff. And then Katie is I would consider a maximalist to a degree.
Surface, pattern, ornamentation. So initially it was just taking his forms and covering them with my patterns, surfaces, and kind of figuring out how to, like, you were working so hard to make these objects perfect. And then I would just take it and try to add so much pattern that you almost couldn't see the surface anymore.
Yeah, so I think there was like a healthy tension, or there still is a healthy tension between what I want out of it and what she wants out of it, and then that also kind of opens up this kind of critique environment where we then are making mutual decisions on singular things. And then, so that also kind of makes me think about how working collaboratively allows you to think more objectively about the work you're making. You can step aside from it. It divides that authorship and ownership, and kind of eliminates that selfishness of the studio artist encapsulated in this room, making pure things exclusively for themselves. 100% of their identity is on this work. Now we can kind of let a lot of that go and just think of these things as objects and how to make these more interesting. And
bounce ideas back and forth.
And bounce ideas back and forth on them.
With the design collective that we had, when we had jobs in Cincinnati, Ohio, our other 2 partners were in Columbus. So for about a year, we would drive back and forth. And then after that, kind of decided that maybe we would go our separate ways. But now in the past 2-3 years, we've been collaborating with other artists. So kind of bringing other people into the fold. So it kind of seems to grow and shrink depending on what we're doing or how we're working. And when we have friends in town to do artist lectures, it seems like our studio kind of becomes like a space for play and experimentation, just like we were doing with nonfiction.
Yeah, there's probably 5 or 6 other artists that we've worked with.
Yeah.
And I think that I would hope that whenever they come into the studio, the same kind of thing happens. No one is really dictating anything. Everyone is really appreciative of everyone's different mindset and skill set, and everyone brings something to the table, and we make the best decisions we can collectively on that. Well, I think for me, it begins with a fascination and a deep love for old things. There's just a quality, that history. I think that time, this kind of becomes saturated in these objects, and they become wealthier in a way.
And we're always looking back at history, at forms, shapes, patterns, surfaces. All those things become like little clues or tags that we're pulling into our work. Like we're always looking at Meissen, porcelain, Nymphenburg, Sèvres. You're looking at like old taxidermy, historic museum displays, old films, and just trying to see like these times where that amount of labor, of content, of surface was really appreciated and valued. Things were slowed down. You could actually like take the time to look into something. So trying to take that back, exploit it a little bit, and then put it on something that's relevant, that's contemporary, and just kind of ask young people, a different audience, to take that time again, to slow down and look at art and see the hands, see the values, see the labor, and ask that small bit of time back from them that we put into our pieces.
It's interesting because we go to museums and we look at these things that are, they're encased and they're lit in a specific way and they're labeled a certain way and they're stripped of all time and cultural relevance, right? They become this artifact that's isolated, often put in conjunction with something else from a different time or a different place next to it.
Yeah.
And then that creates like a new context, right? And so in a certain way, we're creating a new context by, in a sense, collaging and appropriating things and putting them in a new setting. So we can never really see, like, you know, for instance, maybe I go to the Met and look at this Sung Dynasty vase, but I can appreciate all of its qualities and the skill of the artisan, the thrower, the painter, how this design came to be. I don't know if anyone specifically designed these things. I think these shapes kind of evolved over time, but we can't ultimately understand what it was that surrounds these things in the time when they're seen with candlelight or the light of the sun versus, like, you know, the lighting that we give these things. So I think those are the things that we're considering whenever we select these things and appropriate them and recontextualize them.
But yeah, and open it back up for someone to come look at it, to look close, to examine it, to see the evidence of the hand. We were joking last night with the stanchion across the wall, kind of like leaning in to see the work. It's like, oh, it's like we're back at the Met again. You can never get close to anything. So we want to open that up a little bit and have someone examine it and look at it and do all the things that artists love to do when they're up close looking at sculpture.
It also becomes like, it's work about the work. So it's kind of like, it's postmodern, really, right? It's reflective on itself and recontextualized and rearranged.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that came from the Sally Mae Loan Forum. We were looking at our student loans, maybe when we were here that was in Columbus, I think.
Yeah.
We were looking through our loan forms, and it was like for future how to set this up for future retrieval. And we were like, why would you want this back? And then we were talking about how do we make things that we would want back, something that's so good that in the future we'd want to, like, take it back in again, recollect it, recontextualize it.
Yeah, and I think, you know, ultimately we're mining from the past and making things for the future.
Yeah.
Hopefully that they're equally as timeless as the things that we're referencing.
Yeah, it used to be a word when you
was really
Googled,
fun
it would
with it.
just pop up us, and now future retrieval is a real buzzword in documents.
Yeah. So we didn't understand it.
Yeah.
I think one was we didn't understand what it meant.
Yeah.
And two, that in a different way of thinking that directly related to our process.
Yeah. Well, I guess all of it.
Yeah, I mean, it is. The work is about labor.
Yeah.
I mean, that's another layer to what
Yeah.
we think that is happening here is that we put a certain amount of labor on these things that maybe other people wouldn't do, and that's what kind of sets it apart.
Yeah, like some of it's just like getting to a point, like setting up the cut paper piece is exciting to, like, print it all out on bond paper, line the studio walls, and kind of stand back and be like, okay, go, you know, and then start cutting bit by bit. Same with the overglazing, that kind of slow, being able to just sit down in that meditative process of applying surface onto form. It's always fun in the beginning. It's really fun at the end. It's the worst when it's in the middle. I think the same about, like, the mold making, right? Like, the start of it's really exciting. The end of it's really great when you actually cast the mold.
The beginning is the
Yeah.
exciting part. And in fact, for me, like, as far as gathering these 3D objects, it was the 3D scanning was the most exciting part, where I was learning something new. Maybe that's ultimately what it is, at the point where I recognize that I'm learning something new, and then I'm starting to master something, I'm starting to get better at something, and I'm developing a
Yeah.
new skill set, more so than the outcome.
Yeah.
Really, when
I
it's
feel-
done, I'm just like, all right, pack it up, put it somewhere, you know?
Yeah, the
But-
same with, like, the tapestry. Trying to figure out, like, how could I weave a tapestry similar to the way I cut paper. And I felt like that was like a treat. Like, I'd cut paper fast enough to earn 2 months to devote to the tapestry to then go back to cutting the paper again. So just these kind of weird, like, task-based studio
Yeah.
rewards.
I think this also relates to what it's the most exciting part and the most frustrating thing is the point of failure. And on one hand, that's whenever you recognize that something may have to be completely redone or completely redesigned, or that we need to step back a few steps. But at the same time, it's exciting. That's a reinvigorating point whenever you realize that you're actually making something better. And that goes directly back to that point of learning, where you've come to a realization that you can be like farther and better than where you're at.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it feels great to be able to, like, all the things we had planned work out. Like, the work made in the truck, we set the curve up, the curve fits the room, everything. The idea was that we would want these animals to kind of be almost an exploded period room, so it's kind of blown out, where you could move through it, but stand back at the entry point and really see it all as one collective vision. So it's really nice to be able to stand at the doorway and be like, yes, this is happening, this is...
It's pretty rewarding that I sent you a drawing, a square footage drawing of the gallery space, and then we set it up exactly like that, and I think it worked. We haven't had to rearrange anything.
Yeah. But then I think the other back part of me is like, okay, now what? Like, once we have this, like,
exactly.
then now how do we...
I'm on to the next project.
Yeah.
And I think that's the exciting relief part of that, is that it's time to move on to the next thing. Now, it has been part of this reflection in the last day, since we just finished this, is hearing comments from people that are walking by that aren't really necessarily talking to us. For instance, someone said that they wanted to live in here. And I think that really hit home, because we are, in a sense, recreating a domestic space. And these collections are things, we do make these things because we do want to live around these things.
Yeah.
And then someone else, said, I didn't realize that it was going to look like a natural history diorama. It's like, well,
yes,
that's what we were making.
Yeah.
So
it's nice to see all that kind of come together. And then thinking back to what's the most exciting part, I think as, the pedestals were being built, we get the marble for the monkey. When we just start to set everything in place, and we see, like, yes, these pieces that we're adding support the work. They don't diminish it. They don't cover it. These objects have, like, space and room to breathe, yet support a bigger whole. And then those kind of stranger decisions that we make, I think, really pay off and kind of undo a little bit of, like, the tightness of the work.
Mm-hmm. We went back and forth on that.
Yeah.
And that, we have a tendency to make things complete and, relatively tight.
And it sometimes feels really stale.
Yeah, and so we did decide to kind of deconstruct the room. The evidence of the room is still there, right?
Yeah.
But
to leave it open, leave some off and
maybe
not take it all the way to the bitter end.
So hopefully this is a first step towards loosening up a little bit.
Yeah.